Yesterday I was reborn, and today my project proposal has become the engagement gift for her and her new flame. The moment I opened my eyes, the date on my phone screen read, November 15, 2024. 3 days until the finals of the National College Student Entrepreneurship Competition. 5 days until the day I would be scorned by everyone, expelled from school, and my father would be hospitalized from anger. Memories of my past life cut into my mind like a knife. I remember at the finals, when the judges announced the gold medal winner, my partner and girlfriend Luna stood up, took another man's arm, and walked toward the podium. She played evidence in public, a fabricated recording proving that my proposal was plagiarized. I kept giving him chances to come clean, but he disappointed me too much, she said tearfully, as thunderous applause erupted from the audience. I was disqualified. The school issued a public reprimand. My father had a heart attack, and my mother's hair turned gray overnight. As for Luna, she took my business plan and, with her new lover, the judge's son, started a company that went public 2 years later. I crouched in my rented room, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, and swallowed an entire bottle of sleeping pills. Then I woke up. It is now 7 a.m. on November 15, 2024. 72 hours until the finals. I sat on the bed in my school dormitory, with a message from Luna on my phone, "Honey, come to the lab at 3 p.m. Surprise. I gripped my phone tightly, my knuckles turning white. In my past life, this surprise was her asking me to send her the final version of the proposal so she could help check the formatting. I did as she asked. Then, the day before the finals, she told me, "Let's break up. You're not worthy of me. This time, I won't be that fool anymore." I rolled out of bed, turned on my computer, and opened the project folder, a 72-page business plan, 32 sets of experimental data, and 11 patent applications. This was 2.5 years of my hard work. Rain was falling outside the window. I stared at Luna's photo on the screen and smiled. She wanted to steal everything from me. So I'll give her a fake version to steal. What Luna didn't know was that 7 days ago, my advisor, Professor Jeremy, had me attend a closed-door national seminar. At the meeting, an academician pointed out a fatal flaw in our technical approach: if we conducted product testing according to the original plan, the data would collapse at the 17th cycle. After returning, I spent 3 consecutive nights recalculating the entire model. The new plan fixed the vulnerabilities and improved performance by 47%. However, this new plan is stored on my encrypted hard drive. What Luna wants to steal is the old plan. She thinks she knows everything about me. But she doesn't know that in the 24 hours since my rebirth, I have already done 3 things. First, I changed 5 key parameters in the core data of the old plan. Second, I contacted a patent attorney. Third, I sent a message to someone. That person was Zoe, a classmate I helped during my freshman year. She was being bullied by other students at the time, and I stood up for her, helping her revise her competition paper. Later, she transferred schools, and we lost touch. In my past life, she cried the hardest at my funeral. I opened my phone. The message had been read. The reply was only, "I'll help you. The rain outside has stopped." I looked at my reflection on the glass and said something I didn't have time to say in my past life: "Luna, this time, let me teach you what the price is." At 2:58 p.m., I walked into the lab. Luna was already there. She was wearing a white dress, her long hair falling over her shoulders, her eyes curving into a smile. If you didn't know her, you'd think she was the gentlest girl in the world. She came up to me, linked her arm through mine, and said, "You're here. I've got some great news for you." She pulled me down to sit. She opened the computer, and on the screen was the logo of a foundation. She said, "You know Mr. Damon, right? He was one of the judges at last year's startup competition. He saw our business plan and was really interested. He wants us to send him a full version in advance for review. This is an opportunity. If we can get his recommendation, the finals are basically in the bag." I looked at her. Her eyes sparkled with excitement and anticipation, but not love. In my past life, I was so moved I almost cried, thinking she was paving the way for me. Then I obediently sent the proposal to Mr. Damon, but in reality, that email address belonged to her new lover. I smiled and said, "Sure. I'll send it to you now." I handed her the USB drive. Inside were the old plan and a modified version of the data. As long as the product was made according to this plan, it was bound to fail during the 17th test. And at the finals, the judges required a live demonstration. Luna took the USB drive, her fingers trembling slightly. She thought it was excitement, but it was actually to hide her guilt. "You go ahead, I'll go buy a cup of coffee." I stood up and walked toward the door. "Aren't you going to watch me send the email?" she asked, a hint of tension in her voice. I turned to look at her. "You handle things, I trust you." "Of course I trust you. The pit you dug for me, I filled it in for you ahead of time." At the coffee shop, I met Zoe. She was sitting in the corner. 2 years had passed, and she was even more beautiful, but the stubbornness in her eyes hadn't changed. "Kian." She stood up and called my name. "Thank you for coming." I sat down and slid a document across to her. Zoe opened the file, her brow furrowing. It contained screenshots of all the chat records between Luna and that man, Felix. In my past life, I only found out after being expelled that they had been plotting for 3 months. Felix was the son of the competition's jury chairman and also Luna's high school classmate. "What do you need me to do?" Zoe looked up at me. I said, "You're interning at the Provincial Department of Science and Technology, right? I need you to look into something for me, whether the company under Felix's father's name has been involved in academic fraud. In my past life." I paused, then corrected myself. I heard they used fake data to apply for projects. Zoe didn't ask why. She just nodded, "Give me 2 days." I looked at her earnest expression and suddenly remembered 2 years ago. She was a freshman then, bullied by her lab classmates, her paper authorship stolen. I helped her write the appeal materials and accompanied her to the academic affairs office. She cried, but insisted on making her own statement. "Kian, did you help me back then because you felt sorry for me?" she once asked me. "No. It was because you didn't deserve to be treated that way. Now it's my turn." Zoe stood up to leave, but turned back at the door. "Kian, whatever you're doing, don't carry it alone." I nodded, but I didn't tell her that I had already carried death alone once. The next day, Luna invited me to dinner. The restaurant was expensive, and she was dressed beautifully. I knew what this meant. She wanted to move me one last time before the breakup, so I would fall apart even more completely at the finals. She raised her glass and said, "I've been thinking for a long time. After we win the gold award, let's start a business together and buy a house together, okay?" I looked at her. In my past life, I heard a future in those words. Now, I only hear calculation. "Okay," I said, lowering my head to drink my soup. "By the way, Mr. Damon's feedback has come in. He said the proposal is excellent, but a few pieces of data need to be double-checked." She took out her phone. "Can you send me the raw data?" Raw data. That was her real target. Plans could be fabricated, but data never lies. As long as they got their hands on the original experimental data, they could create a version entirely their own. "The data is on the lab computer. I'll copy it tomorrow," I said. "Can't you do it now?" Her voice tightened slightly. "It's the weekend today. The lab has no power. I'll go get it first thing tomorrow morning," I lied. She bit her lip, then quickly smiled again. "Then give it to me tomorrow, no rush." In reality, she was dying of anxiety. But she couldn't show it, because she still thought she was in control. Back in the dormitory at night, I opened the encrypted hard drive. The final version of the new plan, all the data, fully backed up. Then I put another set of original data into an ordinary USB drive. This data looked exactly the same as the real one on the surface, but there was a logic bomb hidden in the core algorithm. If someone directly copied and pasted it into a new plan, it would amplify the cost calculation error of the entire model tenfold. In other words, whoever got their hands on this data would end up with a plan that seemed flawless on the surface but was ultimately impossible to implement. I put the USB drive into the drawer, then opened my phone and saw a message from Zoe. Found it. Felix's father's company applied for a provincial key project 3 years ago using false data, but it was suppressed by insiders. I found the archived copy of the whistleblower letter from back then. I stared at the screen, my fingers trembling slightly. In my past life, this matter was exposed 2 years later, only brought to light after Felix's father retired. If I detonate it now, Felix will lose his qualification as a judge, and Luna's backing will collapse instantly. But the timing isn't right yet. I replied, hold on to it for now. Release it on the day of the finals. Zoe replied instantly, got it. I stared at those 2 words, got it, and suddenly felt a pang in my heart. This girl never wasted words. The night before the finals, Luna asked me to meet on the rooftop of the teaching building. The night was pitch black, and she stood by the railing, the wind lifting her hair. Let's break up, she said, her tone eerily calm. I knew it all along, but I still played along and put on a shocked expression. Why? She turned around and looked at me. Because you don't deserve it. Half of that plan you made was my idea. Do you really think you could have gotten this far on your own? Mr. Damon said your work had no commercial value, it was my revisions that made it usable. So what? I asked. So I've already given the plan to someone who can actually make it happen. She smiled, the same smile I had seen once in my past life, on the award stage. Tomorrow, Felix will use this plan to compete. And I will be his partner. I stared into her eyes. You stole from me. She laughed. Stole. Do you have proof? The emails you sent me, you gave them to me willingly. Your data, you uploaded it yourself. Tomorrow, I'll tell everyone that you've been harassing me, that I had no choice but to leave you. And you'll have to withdraw from the competition due to psychological issues. She walked up to me, stood on her tiptoes, and whispered in my ear, you were never good enough for me from the start. I was just using you. In my past life, those words nailed me to the spot. I watched her walk away, then from the rooftop, I saw the city lights and felt like I had nothing. But this time, I smiled. Luna. I called out to her. She turned around. Are you sure you got my proposal? She paused for a moment, her expression shifting slightly. What do you mean? I said, nothing. Good luck tomorrow. She didn't know that on page 17 of the USB drive she stole, the parameters were wrong. She didn't know that the original data she prided herself on would make her lose face on stage. And she certainly didn't know that the Mr. Damon she mentioned was actually someone even she couldn't afford to provoke, the head of the discipline inspection team of the Provincial Science and Technology Department. The day of the finals. When I walked into the venue, everyone looked at me with strange eyes. Luna had posted a long post on her moments last night, claiming that I had harassed her, threatened her, and plagiarized her ideas. The comments section was full of scolding. My phone kept buzzing. Classmates, teachers, and even my parents had sent me messages. I didn't reply to a single one. Because I had already made my arrangements. In the first row, Zoe sat in the media area behind the judges' panel, holding a file folder. It contained evidence of Felix's father's forgery. In the second row, Professor Jeremy sat there, flanked by 2 experts from the Provincial Department of Science and Technology. They had come to watch the new technology demonstration, but they would see 2 sets of proposals. In the third row, my lawyer sat there. The documents in his hands proved that my patent application had been submitted 2 days earlier than the email Luna sent to Felix. I walked toward the contestants' area. Luna and Felix were already there. Felix had his arm around her waist, looking at me as if I were trash. Felix sneered, "What, you still came? Don't you know you've already been disqualified?" Who said that? I asked calmly. I said it. A middle-aged man walked over. It was Felix's father, the chairman of the competition jury. He looked at me. You have a character issue. The competition committee has decided to disqualify you. The venue fell silent. Everyone was looking at me. I glanced around and saw Luna's smug smile, Felix's contemptuous gaze, and the sympathetic looks from the audience. Then I smiled. I said, Mr. Edgar, before you disqualify me, don't you want to take a look at who wrote the plan your son used? I took out my phone and opened a file. It was a screenshot of an email Luna sent the day before yesterday. The recipient wasn't Mr. Damon at all, but Felix's email address. More importantly, in the email's attachment, the document's creator information showed my name. Felix's father's face changed. Luna screamed, "That's impossible." I deleted the creator information. I said calmly, "What you deleted was just the surface. But the underlying metadata of the document, you can't delete that. Do you want me to project it onto the big screen for everyone to see now?" Her face turned pale. That's my favorite expression of hers. Professor Jeremy stood up and walked to the stage. "Dear judges, as the supervising teacher, I can confirm that this proposal was completed independently by Kian. His lab records, raw data, and patent application all have timestamps. He took out a USB drive. This is the backup he sent me 2 weeks ago." Luna panicked. "That's mine. He stole it from me." Professor Jeremy looked at her. "Is that so? Then tell me, which theorem was used in the derivation of the formula on page 17 of the proposal?" Luna opened her mouth but couldn't say a word. Felix pushed her. "You said you could handle it." "I can." Luna stammered. I walked onto the stage, picked up the microphone. Page 17 uses a variant of the Bayesian inference formula, combined with the Markov chain Monte Carlo method. This derivation took me 3 full weeks to write. The entire venue fell silent. Then I turned and looked at the judges' panel. "Mr. Edgar, do you still want to disqualify me now?" Felix's father's face had already turned ashen. He wanted to say something, but at that moment, Zoe stood up. "Esteemed judges, I am Zoe, an intern at the Provincial Department of Science and Technology. I have here a document concerning Felix and the company under his father's name, which involved the use of false data to fraudulently obtain provincial project funding 3 years ago." She handed the document bag to the head of the disciplinary inspection group on stage, the very person Luna believed to be Mr. Damon. Felix's father abruptly stood up. "What are you doing?" "Mr. Edgar, please cooperate with the investigation," the head of the disciplinary inspection group said calmly. I saw Felix's face twist. He suddenly grabbed Luna's hair. "This is all your fault. You said you could handle it. You bitch." Luna screamed as she was yanked to the ground, her high heels broken and her dress torn. She wanted to cry, but couldn't. I remembered my past life, dying alone in a rented room. Now, she finally knows what it means to pay the price. The finals continued. Felix was taken away for investigation, and his qualification was revoked. Luna collapsed on the floor and was escorted out of the venue by staff. It's my turn. I walk up to the stage, open my laptop, but what I display is not the old proposal. Dear judges, the previously submitted proposal was a draft. Now, I am going to present the revised version, which solves the data collapse issue encountered during the 17th cycle test of the original plan, with a 47% performance improvement. On the screen, the new proposal's data, charts, and experimental results are presented one by one. The experts in the audience begin to whisper among themselves. Someone shouts, "That's impossible. How could you have calculated a new model in such a short time?" I smiled. I spent 3 consecutive nights. 7 days ago, at a closed-door seminar recommended by Professor Jeremy, the academician pointed out the flaws in the old plan. From that day on, I started recalculating. I looked at Luna in the audience. She had already been helped to the door but hadn't left yet. Her face was covered in tears and hatred. "Luna, I said into the microphone, loud enough for the entire venue to hear, "What you wanted to steal is something I was going to discard." She covered her face and turned to run away. This time, she was the one who didn't deserve me. I won the gold medal. It wasn't luck, it was because I only slept 3 hours a day over these 3 days. I rechecked all the data, ran 32 sets of control experiments, and wrote 47 pages of technical documentation. In my computer, there are over 800 pages of drafts alone. When I received the award, I stood on the stage and saw Zoe. She wasn't in the media area but standing in a corner at the very back. She was holding a file folder, the very one that helped me win everything. She looked at me, a complex light flickering in her eyes. As I stepped off the stage, many people rushed over to congratulate me. I dealt with them one by one, but my eyes kept searching for her. By the time I pushed through the crowd, she was already gone. I ran out of the venue and saw her in the hallway. She was leaning against the wall, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Congratulations." She handed me the coffee. "Why don't you go in?" I asked. "That was your moment." "I didn't want to take it away from you," she said. I looked at her face. Her eyelashes were long, her eyes were bright, and there was a trace of coffee foam on her lips. "Zoe," I called her. 2 years ago, I helped you. Do you remember?" She nodded. "Back then, you said, 'Kian, I will definitely repay you someday.'" She lowered her head. "I did say that. I said, I don't want a reward. I want you to stay." She looked up at me. Her eyes were red. "I said, back when you were being bullied, I couldn't protect you until the end. When you transferred schools, I didn't even get to see you off. This time, I don't want to miss out again." She cried. As the tears fell, I reached out and wiped them away. It took a rebirth for me to realize who is worth cherishing. A week later, Luna was expelled from school. Evidence of her theft of trade secrets was submitted to the police, and she now faces criminal charges. Felix's father was placed under investigation, and Felix was detained on suspicion of fraud. I received an invitation from the best startup incubator in the country. The valuation of the new project was 30 times that of my previous life. That night, I stood on the balcony, gazing at the city lights. In my past life, I saw the same lights from the rooftop and thought they represented despair. Now I understand that the lights were never despair, it was I who gave up the right to look up. The phone rang. Zoe sent a message, "Want to have breakfast together tomorrow?" I replied, "My treat. For the rest of my life, it's on me." She sent a smiley face. I turned off my phone and looked up at the sky. Starting over isn't about getting back at anyone, it's about telling the version of myself who was once let down, "You deserve a better life."